Caleb Morrison hadn't touched his wedding ring in 2 years. Tonight he slipped it off and placed it beside his wife's photograph. His hands were steady. His heart was not. The blizzard screamed outside. Inside, silence. His daughter Lily hadn't spoken a word since the fire that killed her mother and brother. Then came the knock. 3 desperate pounds against his door. And everything Caleb Morrison had built to protect himself from ever feeling again was about to shatter. If you want to know what happens when he opens that door, subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. The fire crackled low in the stone hearth. Caleb sat alone at a table built for 6, pushing cold beans around a tin plate he had no intention of finishing. 2 years. 730 nights of this. Eating food that tasted like ash. Sleeping in a bed that felt like a coffin. Breathing air that seemed too thick for one man when it used to fill a home with 4. Papa. He looked up. Lily stood at the bottom of the stairs clutching the rag doll she never let go of. 6 years old. Blonde hair tangled. Nightgown too short because he kept forgetting children grew. "What is it, little bird?" She pointed toward the window. Said nothing else. She rarely did anymore. Caleb rose from the chair, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. The wind had picked up in the last hour, howling like wolves hunting prey. Snow pelted the glass so hard it sounded like gravel thrown by angry hands. He saw nothing but white. A wall of it. "Just the storm," he said. "Go on back to bed." Lily shook her head, pointed again. Then he heard it. 3 knocks, weak, desperate, the kind of knock that came from hands too cold to make fists. Caleb's jaw tightened. Nobody came out this far. Not in weather like this. Not since he'd made it clear he wanted to be left alone. The Morrison Ranch sat 12 miles from the nearest town, and that was exactly how he liked it. The knocking came again. Harder now, more urgent, like whoever was out there knew this was their last chance. "Stay here," he told Lily. He grabbed the Winchester rifle from above the door. Colorado Territory in 1878 wasn't a place where you opened your door to strangers without being armed. Outlaws, deserters claimed Jumpers the West was full of desperate men made dangerous by winter. "Who's there?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, unused to speaking to anyone but his silent daughter. "Please." A woman's voice thin as paper, cracking at the edges. "Please, sir. My children. They're dying." Caleb's hand froze on the door latch. Children. The word hit him like a bullet to the chest. He closed his eyes, saw Daniel's face, 8 years old, laughing, running through the fields, then screaming, then silent forever. "Mister, please." The woman's voice again, weaker now. "I can see your light. I know someone's in there. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Work for nothing. Sleep in your barn. Just please. My babies." A small sound behind him. Caleb turned. Lily had moved closer. Her eyes, Martha's eyes, God help him, were fixed on the door. And for the first time in 2 years, he saw something in them besides emptiness. Hope. His daughter was hoping he would open that door. Caleb's hand shook as he lifted the latch. The wind hit him first, sharp as a knife cutting through his shirt, like it wasn't there. Snow swirled into the cabin, white and wild. Then he saw them. A woman on her knees collapsed against his porch railing. Behind her, 3 children huddled together like a litter of abandoned puppies. Snow clung to their hair, their clothes, their eyelashes. They weren't even shivering anymore, which meant they were past shivering, past cold, moving toward something worse. The woman lifted her head. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp as blades beneath skin stretched too tight. Her lips had gone from blue to white, her eyes green and desperate locked onto his. "Please," she whispered, "not for me, for them." Caleb looked at the children. The oldest was a girl, maybe 10, standing straight, despite her obvious exhaustion, trying to hold the smaller ones together. Her jaw was set. Her eyes burned with something fierce, protective, ancient. A child playing mother because she had no choice. A boy younger, maybe 7, had his arms wrapped around the smallest girl. His whole body shook, but he didn't let go. Wouldn't let go. His eyes darted to Caleb's rifle, then to his face, calculating, assessing, ready to fight or run, despite weighing maybe 50 pounds soaking wet. And the smallest. A girl no more than 3. Limp in her brother's arms, face white as the snow around them. Not moving. Caleb's blood turned to ice. The little girl had amber eyes. Half closed now, barely conscious, but amber. Hazel gold. The exact color of Martha's eyes. The exact color he saw every night in his dreams before he woke up screaming. "Dear God," he breathed. Then he moved. He thrust the rifle into the corner, stepped out into the blizzard, and scooped the 3 children up in his arms like they weighed nothing. The oldest girl struggled. "It's all right," he said roughly. "I've got you. I've got all of you." He turned to the woman. She was trying to stand, failing her legs giving out beneath her. "Can you walk?" I think." "Don't think. Just move." He hooked his free arm around her waist and half carried, half dragged her through the door. She was lighter than Lily. Lighter than any grown woman should be. The door slammed shut behind them. The wind's scream became a muffled roar. Caleb set the children down by the fire. The oldest girl immediately pulled the smaller ones close, arranging them, protecting them even now. The boy stared at Caleb with eyes that held too much knowledge for someone his age. "Lily," Caleb called. "Blankets, from the cedar chest, all of them." His daughter ran. Actually ran. He hadn't seen her move that fast since before the fire. The woman collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the floor. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. Her hands, when she lifted them, were red and raw, the skin cracked and bleeding from cold. "Thank you," she managed. Thank you, I'll repay you. I swear I have money. Not much, but—" "Stop talking." Caleb knelt beside the smallest girl, pressed his fingers to her neck, found a pulse weak but there. "How long were you out there?" I lost track. Hours, I think. Our wagon broke down. Axle snapped. We walked. In this—" Caleb stared at her. "You walked in this storm with children." The woman's chin lifted. Even half-frozen, even dying, she found the strength to glare at him. "I didn't have a choice." Something in her voice stopped him. Something that sounded like caged fury, like desperation, like a mother who had weighed impossible options and chosen the impossible anyway. Caleb turned back to the smallest girl, started rubbing her hands, her feet trying to bring warmth back to limbs that had gone dangerously cold. "What's her name?" "Grace." The woman crawled forward, her movements clumsy. "Her name is Grace. Is she— will she—" "She needs warmth, food, rest." He looked at the woman. "So do you. So do all of you." Lily appeared with an armful of blankets. She dumped them beside Caleb, then stood there staring at the other children. The older girl stared back. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lily did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She reached out and touched the older girl's hand. "You're cold," Lily said. Her voice was rusty, like a gate that hadn't been opened in too long. "I'll get more blankets." She ran off again. Caleb felt his throat close. He wrapped Grace in the thickest blanket, then handed blankets to the others. The boy took his without a word, wrapped it around himself, then immediately tried to give half of it to his older sister. "Keep it," the girl said. "I'm fine." "You ain't fine," the boy shot back. "You ain't been fine since Nathaniel." The woman's voice was sharp. "Don't." The boy Nathaniel clamped his mouth shut, but his eyes flickered to Caleb, then away, full of secrets he wasn't supposed to tell. Caleb filed it away. Later. Right now, survival came first. "Can you stand?" he asked the woman. She tried, failed, tried again. This time, the older girl, Rosie Caleb would learn later, moved to help her mother up. Together, they got her to her feet. "Kitchen," Caleb said. "This way." The kitchen was warm from the cook stove. Caleb had kept it burning all evening, more out of habit than hunger. Now he was grateful. He settled the woman in a chair, then turned to the stove. Leftover stew from yesterday. Bread he'd baked 2 days ago. Coffee in the pot. It wasn't much, but it was something. "I'm going to heat this," he said. "Don't move." The woman nodded weakly. The children arranged themselves around her like sentries. Even little Grace, coming slowly back to consciousness, reached for her mother's hand. Caleb worked in silence, stirred the stew, sliced the bread thick, poured coffee into cups. His hands moved automatically while his mind raced. Who were they? Where had they come from? What were they running from? Because they were running. He knew it the moment he saw the woman's eyes. He'd spent 5 years as a Texas Ranger before the war, 5 more after. He knew what hunted people looked like. And this woman, she was being hunted by something that scared her more than a blizzard that could kill her children. "Here." He set the food on the table. 5 bowls of stew, 4 chunks of bread, 5 cups of coffee, 4 with extra sugar, 1 black for himself. The children stared at the food like it might disappear. "Eat," Caleb said. Nobody moved. "I said eat." The woman looked at her children, then at Caleb. Her voice was barely a whisper. "How much do we owe you?" "Nothing." "Everyone wants something, mister. I've learned that the hard way." Caleb met her eyes. Saw the fear there, the wariness, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who had learned not to trust kindness because kindness always came with a price. "My name is Caleb Morrison," he said quietly. "I own this ranch. I live here with my daughter. We don't get visitors, and I like it that way. I didn't ask you to knock on my door. I didn't ask for any of this." He paused. "But I ain't the kind of man who lets children starve on his porch, so eat, rest. When the storm clears, you can decide what comes next. Until then, you're under my roof, which means you're under my protection. Understand?" The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Clara," she said. "My name is Clara Whitfield. These are my children, Rosie, Nathaniel, and Grace." "Ma'am?" He touched his hat brim, old habit, then sat down at the head of the table, his chair, his place, the seat from which he had once watched his family laugh and eat and live. Now he watched strangers do the same. Lily crept into the kitchen. She stopped at the doorway, uncertain, clutching her rag doll to her chest. Rosie saw her first. The 10-year-old's face softened. "You want to sit with us?" Lily looked at Caleb. He nodded once. She walked slowly, carefully around the table and slid into the chair beside Rosie. The 2 girls didn't speak, but Rosie shifted her chair slightly, making room, and Lily relaxed in a way Caleb hadn't seen in 2 years. They ate. The only sounds were the scrape of spoons against bowls, the crackle of the fire, the howl of wind outside. Grace ate slowly, her mother helping her with each bite. Nathaniel shoveled food like he expected it to be taken away. Rosie ate carefully, methodically, dividing her portions, giving extra to her siblings, taking less for herself. And Clara watched Caleb. He could feel her eyes on him, measuring, assessing, trying to figure out what kind of man he was, what he wanted, what the catch was. There was always a catch. She'd learned that somewhere, learned it hard. "You should eat too, ma'am," Caleb said without looking up. "You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You can barely stand. If you collapse from hunger, your children have no one." The words were harsh. He knew it as soon as they left his mouth. But he'd lost the ability to soften his edges years ago, buried it somewhere between Martha's grave and the ashes of everything he'd built. Clara flinched. Then slowly she picked up her spoon. They ate in silence. After dinner, Caleb showed them the spare rooms. The ranch house was bigger than he needed. He'd built it expecting a family that would grow children, that would fill every room with noise and laughter. Now most of it sat empty. "This is the guest room," he said, pushing open a door. "You and the little one can sleep here." Clara looked at the bed, at the clean sheets, at the warm quilts piled high. Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. "Thank you," she whispered. "This room's for your boy." Caleb moved down the hall. His hand hesitated on the door handle. The room behind it, Daniel's room. Untouched for 2 years. Every toy in place. Every drawing still pinned to the wall. A shrine to a boy who would never grow older. He pushed open the door. Nathaniel peered inside. His eyes went wide. "Sir, I can't. This is—" "It's just a room," Caleb said roughly. "It needs to be used." But it wasn't just a room. They both knew it. The carved wooden horses on the shelf. The small boots by the bed. The half-finished drawing of a family father, mother, son, daughter that Daniel had been working on the day he died. Nathaniel looked at Caleb with eyes too old for his face. "I'll take good care of it, sir. I promise." Caleb nodded, couldn't speak. Walked away before the boy could see his face. The last room was Lily's. "Rosie can stay with me," Lily said. The words tumbled out in a rush, more than she'd spoken in months. "If she wants. I have extra blankets, and I can show her my books. Do you like books, Rosie?" Rosie smiled, the first real smile Caleb had seen from her. "I love books." The two girls disappeared into Lily's room, already talking. Their voices drifted through the closed door, soft and excited the way children's voices were supposed to sound. Caleb stood in the hallway listening. His daughter was talking, laughing, coming back to life. Because of these strangers. Because of one desperate knock on his door. Shutter BT. Later, long after the children were asleep, Caleb sat in the dark kitchen. The fire burned low. Outside, the storm raged on. He heard soft footsteps, turned to find Clara in the doorway, wrapped in one of Martha's old shawls, her face pale in the firelight. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I." She sat down across from him. For a while, neither spoke. "You have questions," Clara finally said. "I can see them eating at you." "It ain't my business." "It became your business when you opened that door." She folded her hands on the table. They were still red, still raw, but the bleeding had stopped. "I owe you the truth. You deserve that much." Caleb said nothing, waited. Clara took a breath. "My husband Henry died 10 months ago. Consumption. He was a blacksmith in Kansas, a good one. People came from 3 counties to have him shoe their horses, fix their equipment. We weren't rich, but we were happy." She paused. Her jaw tightened. "When Henry died, I found out he owed money. A lot of money. He'd borrowed from his brother Eugene to expand the shop. Eugene he's a banker now. Councilman. Important man in town. And he wants his money back. He wants more than money." Clara's voice dropped. "He wants me. He proposed the day after Henry's funeral. Said he'd forgive the debt if I married him. When I refused, he—" She stopped, swallowed. "He used his connections. Found a friendly judge. Got himself named legal guardian of my children, said I was unfit to raise them alone." Caleb felt something cold settle in his gut. "He took your children." "He tried. I ran first. 6 weeks we've been running. Through Missouri, across Kansas, into Colorado. I was trying to get to Oregon. My sister lives there. I thought if I could just get far enough. But your wagon broke. Axle snapped 5 miles back. We walked the rest. I didn't know what else to do." Caleb studied her face, saw the exhaustion there, the fear, but also something else. Steel. The kind of strength that didn't bend, didn't break, no matter how hard the world pushed. "This Eugene," he said slowly. "He's still looking for you. He'll never stop. I know him. He doesn't forgive, doesn't forget. He'll spend every dollar he has to get those children back. Not because he loves them, he doesn't even know them, but because I told him no, twice." Her laugh was bitter. Men like Eugene Mercer don't know how to hear no. Caleb thought of the children sleeping in his house. Rosie fierce and protective. Nathaniel watchful and wary. Little Grace with her amber eyes, so like Martha's, it made his chest ache. "He won't find you here," he heard himself say. "This ranch is 12 miles from anywhere. Nobody comes out this far." Clara shook her head. "Mr. Morrison." "Caleb. Caleb, you don't understand. Eugene has money, power. He'll hire people, trackers, bounty hunters, the law itself if he has to. It's only a matter of time." "Then we use that time." Clara stared at him. Caleb leaned forward. "Wyoming Territory is a 3-day ride from here when the weather's clear. They got different laws up there. Women can own property. Vote. If you establish residency, you can fight for custody under their courts instead of Kansas courts." "How do you know all this?" "I was a Texas Ranger for 10 years. I know how the law works. More importantly, I know how to work around it." Clara's hands trembled on the table. "Why would you help us? You don't even know us." "No," Caleb agreed. "I don't." He looked toward the hallway, toward the rooms where the children slept. "But my daughter spoke more words tonight than she has in 2 years. She laughed. She made a friend. And that little girl of yours, Grace, she's got the same color eyes my wife had. Same exact shade." His voice roughened. "I buried my wife and my son 2 years ago. Been dying inside ever since. But tonight—" He stopped, couldn't finish. Clara reached across the table. Her hand covered his. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Caleb didn't pull away. Couldn't. Her hand was warm, alive, real. A human connection he'd gone 2 years without. "The storm will last 2, maybe 3 more days," he said finally. "When it clears, we'll figure out what comes next. Until then, you and your children are safe here. I give you my word." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We've got a hard road ahead." She smiled through the tears. The first real smile he'd seen from her. "I'm used to hard roads, Caleb Morrison." "I reckon you are, ma'am. I reckon you are." They sat in silence as the storm howled outside 2 broken people bound by circumstance and something else. Something neither of them was ready to name. In the room down the hall, Lily Morrison was dreaming for the first time in 2 years. Not nightmares of fire and screaming, but dreams of new friends and laughter and a house full of voices. In Daniel's old room, Nathaniel Whitfield slept with one hand on the carved wooden horse he'd found on the shelf, dreaming of a father he barely remembered, and a man he'd just met who reminded him of everything a father should be. In Lily's room, Rosie Whitfield lay awake, listening to her new friend breathe, making plans, preparing strategies, being the protector she'd been forced to become. And in the guest room, little Grace slept with a peaceful smile on her face, her small hand clutching a rag doll that wasn't hers, a doll named Polly, that Lily had pressed into her hands before bed, the doll she'd clung to since the fire, the doll that meant everything. "She's cold," Lily had said simply. "Polly will keep her warm." One day, one knock, one choice, and nothing would ever be the same. The storm raged on, burying the world in white, cutting them off from everything beyond these walls. But inside, something was thawing. Something frozen was beginning to melt. Caleb Morrison had built walls around his heart so high he thought nothing could ever breach them. He was wrong. 3 desperate knocks had done what 2 years of solitude could not. They had reminded him he was still alive. Morning came with the smell of coffee and something Caleb hadn't smelled in 2 years, bacon frying in a cast iron pan. He lay still for a moment, disoriented. Martha used to wake him this way, with the sounds and smells of breakfast being made, with the promise of a day that held meaning beyond mere survival. But Martha was dead. He dressed quickly, his movements sharp with confusion and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. When he descended the stairs, he found Clara at his stove. Her back was to him, her movements efficient, despite her obvious exhaustion. She'd found his supplies, his pans, his coffee grounds. She moved through his kitchen like she belonged there. "You should be resting," he said. Clara didn't turn around. "I don't know how to rest, Mr. Morrison. Never learned. Besides, you fed my children last night. Least I can do is make breakfast." "I told you to call me Caleb. And I told you I'd repay you somehow." She glanced over her shoulder, a hint of defiance in her green eyes. "This is me starting." Caleb opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. The bacon smelled good, better than anything he'd managed to cook in 2 years. And there was something about watching her work something that filled a space in his chest he'd forgotten was empty. "Coffee's ready," Clara said. "Cups are where you left them last night." He poured himself a cup, then leaned against the counter and watched her work. Her hands were steadier this morning, though the raw patches on her fingers still looked painful. She'd tied her hair back with a strip of cloth, revealing the sharp lines of her face, the hollows beneath her cheekbones. She was beautiful, he realized with a start. Not in the soft, gentle way Martha had been, but in a fierce survivor's way. Like a blade that had been forged in fire and come out stronger. "You're staring," Clara said without looking up. "Apologies, ma'am." "Clara, if I'm calling you Caleb, you're calling me Clara." "Fair enough." Small footsteps thundered down the stairs. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour, his eyes bright with an energy Caleb hadn't seen the night before. "Mr. Caleb, sir." The boy stood straight, practically vibrating. "You said something about horses last night. In the barn. I heard you tell Mama. Can I help? I know horses. My pa taught me before he got sick. I can brush 'em, feed 'em clean hooves. I'm strong for my age, everyone says so." Caleb looked at the boy, 7 years old, thin but wiry hands already calloused from work. A child who'd learned too young that usefulness meant survival. "You had breakfast yet?" "No, sir, but I ain't hungry. I can eat later. Please, sir, I want to help." Clara turned from the stove. Nathaniel let the man have his coffee first. "But Mama..." "What did I say about pestering?" The boy's face fell. He looked down at his boots, worn through at the toes, Caleb noticed. Too small for his growing feet. "It ain't pestering," Caleb said quietly. "A man wants to work, that's something to respect." He drained his coffee cup. "Finish your breakfast first. All of it mind. Then meet me at the barn. You can help with the morning chores." Nathaniel's face lit up like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." He practically ran to the table, shoveling food into his mouth so fast Caleb worried he'd choke. Clara caught Caleb's eye, mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." He nodded once and headed for the door. The cold hit him like a wall when he stepped outside. The storm had blown itself out sometime in the night, leaving behind a world buried in white. Drifts piled 3 feet high against the barn door. The sky was the pale blue of winter mornings, empty and endless. Caleb grabbed a shovel and started digging. The work felt good, simple, honest. The kind of labor that let your mind go quiet. He'd cleared a path halfway to the barn when he heard the cabin door open. Nathaniel came running, coat buttoned, wrong hat, a skew breath puffing white in the frozen air. "I'm here, sir. I'm ready." Caleb handed him a smaller shovel. "Dig." They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the scrape of metal against snow, the crunch of their boots, the distant whicker of horses who knew feeding time was coming. "Mr. Caleb." Nathaniel's voice was hesitant. "Just Caleb." "Caleb, sir. Can I ask you something?" "Depends on what it is." The boy kept shoveling, but his rhythm slowed. Your daughter. Lily. She don't talk much, does she? Caleb's shovel stopped. No, she doesn't. Is it 'cause something bad happened to her? The question hung in the cold air. Caleb could ignore it, shut it down, change the subject. That's what he would have done yesterday. What he'd been doing for 2 years. But there was something about this boy, this earnest, hard-working, too-old child, that made Caleb want to answer honestly. There was a fire, he said slowly. 2 years ago, our house in Texas. Lily's mother and brother were inside. His jaw tightened. I was out on patrol, supposed to be protecting people. Wasn't there to protect my own family. Nathaniel stopped shoveling. His small face was solemn. Did they pass on? They did. I'm real sorry, sir. So am I. They stood in the snow, man and boy breathing cold air, and shared grief. My pa passed on too, Nathaniel said quietly. Consumption. Took him slow. I watched him get smaller and smaller, until there weren't nothing left but skin and bones. Mama says he's in heaven now, but sometimes I get mad at him for leaving us. Is that wrong? Caleb felt his throat close. No, son. That ain't wrong. That's just grief. It makes us feel all sorts of things we don't expect. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Then, without warning, he stepped forward and wrapped his thin arms around Caleb's waist, pressing his face into the man's coat. Caleb froze. He hadn't been hugged in 2 years. Hadn't let anyone touch him. But this boy, this fatherless child, was clinging to him like a lifeline, and something inside Caleb, something frozen and hard and protected, cracked. His hand came up, hesitated, then settled on Nathaniel's back. It's all right, son, he heard himself say. It's going to be all right. They stood like that for a long moment, two strangers bound by loss, warming each other against the cold. Then Nathaniel pulled back, swiping at his eyes with his sleeve. Sorry, sir. Didn't mean to. Nothing to be sorry for. Caleb cleared his throat. Now, you want to see those horses or not? The boy's smile could have melted the snow around them. The barn was warm compared to outside, filled with the smell of hay and animals and life. 2 horses stood in their stalls. Buck, a dark bay gelding with a white blaze, and Pepper, a gray mare with gentle eyes. This here's Buck, Caleb said. He's mine. Been with me since Texas. The mare's Pepper. She was my wife's horse. Nathaniel approached the stalls with the careful respect of someone who understood animals. He held out his hand for Buck to smell, waited for the horse's approval, then gently stroked the velvet nose. He's beautiful, the boy breathed. Can I brush him? In a minute. First we check water, then hay. Horses eat before we do. That's the rule. They moved through the morning chores together. Caleb showed Nathaniel where the feed was kept, how to check for ice in the water troughs, how to look for signs of illness or injury. The boy absorbed everything, asking questions, remembering details, eager to prove himself useful. You're a natural, Caleb admitted after watching Nathaniel calm a nervous Pepper with just his voice and touch. Your pa taught you well. Pa said horses know things about people. Said they can tell who's kind and who ain't. He was right. What do they think of you? Caleb almost smiled. Reckon they think I'm stubborn and set in my ways. Are you? Probably. Nathaniel laughed, a genuine child's laugh that echoed in the barn rafters. Caleb couldn't remember the last time he'd heard a sound so pure. They finished the chores and were heading back to the house when Nathaniel stopped suddenly. Caleb, sir, look at Pepper. Caleb turned. The gray mare was standing oddly. Her weight shifted her breathing faster than it should be. When did this start? He moved to the stall, his experienced eyes scanning the horse. Just now, I think. She seemed fine when we fed her. Caleb opened the stall door and stepped inside. Pepper nickered nervously but didn't shy away. He ran his hands along her sides, her legs checking for injuries. Her belly's tight, he muttered. And she's sweating. Is she sick? Could be colic. Bad hay change in weather. Lots of things can cause it. Caleb straightened. Go to the house. Tell your mother I need help out here. She said she grew up on a farm. Ask if she knows anything about treating horses. Nathaniel ran. Caleb stayed with Pepper, keeping her calm, talking to her in the low, soothing voice that horses responded to. Easy, girl, easy. We're gonna figure this out. Minutes later, footsteps approached. Clara appeared in the barn doorway, a wool shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, her face alert. Nate said the horse is sick. Might be colic. You know what that is. I know. She moved past him into the stall, her hands already reaching for Pepper's belly. Pa lost a horse to it when I was 12. Watch the whole thing. It ain't pretty. Her fingers pressed, probed, assessed. Pepper stamped nervously, but didn't fight. She's bloated, Clara said. Could be gas colic. That's better than impaction. She looked at Caleb. You got peppermint oil ginger? In the house, medicine cabinet. Get it. And warm water, not hot, just warm. I'll need rags too. Nate, walk her around the barn. Slow circles. Don't let her lie down. Caleb hesitated for just a moment, surprised by the authority in her voice. Then he nodded and ran. When he returned with the supplies, Clara was already mixing something in a bucket, a combination that smelled sharp and medicinal. Hold her head, she instructed. Keep her calm while I work on her belly. They worked together, moving around each other with an ease that surprised them both. Clara massaged the horse's belly in slow, careful circles, while Caleb kept Pepper's head steady, murmuring reassurances. Nathaniel walked the mare between treatments, his young face set with determination. You're good at this, Caleb said during a brief pause. I'm good at keeping things alive. Clara wiped sweat from her forehead with her sleeve. Had to be. When Henry got sick, there was no one else, just me. That's a hard thing. Hard things are the only things I know. An hour passed, then 2. Slowly, Pepper's breathing eased. Her belly softened. She stopped sweating and started showing interest in the hay in her feeder. She's going to be all right, Clara said finally, her voice tired but triumphant. Crisis passed. Caleb looked at her, really looked. Her hair had come loose from its tie, falling around her face in damp tangles. Her hands were covered in horse sweat and medicine. Her dress was stained. She had never looked more capable, more alive. Thank you, he said quietly. Pepper was my wife's horse, if I'd lost her. You didn't. Because of you. Clara met his eyes. Something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of equals. We make a good team, she said. Reckon we do. They walked back to the house together. Nathaniel between them, the morning sun bright on the snow. Inside they could hear the girls' voices, Lily and Rosie and little Grace talking and laughing. Talking and laughing. Caleb stopped on the porch listening. When's the last time your daughter laughed like that? Clara asked softly. 2 years. His voice was rough. Hasn't made a sound like that in 2 years. Clara's hand touched his arm just briefly. Then maybe some good can come from this mess after all. They went inside. The kitchen was chaos, the good kind. Rosie was attempting to teach Lily how to braid Grace's hair. All 3 girls tangled together on the floor. Grace was giggling her small hands, trying to help, and mostly making things worse. Lily was laughing, actually laughing, her face bright in a way Caleb had forgotten was possible. We made a braid, Grace announced when she saw her mother. See, Lily teached me. Taught? Rosie corrected automatically. That's what I said? Clara knelt down and examined the lopsided braid with exaggerated seriousness. That is the finest braid I have ever seen. Really. Really and truly. Grace beamed. Then her eyes found Caleb. Mr. Caleb, do you like our braid? Every head turned toward him. 4 pairs of eyes, 3 young and hopeful, one older, and watching to see how he'd respond. Caleb cleared his throat. "It's a fine braid. Real fine." Grace scrambled to her feet and ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his leg. "I like you, Mr. Caleb. You're nice." The words hit him like a physical blow. Simple words from a simple child, but they reached into his chest and squeezed. "I like you too, little one," he heard himself say. Lily was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Then slowly, she smiled a real smile, not the empty, curved lips she'd offered for 2 years. "Papa," she said, "can Rosie and Grace stay forever?" The question hung in the air. Clara started to speak, to explain, to manage expectations. But Caleb spoke first. "We'll see, little bird. We'll see." The rest of the day passed in a blur of warmth and voices and something that felt terrifyingly like family. Clara cooked. The children played. Caleb fixed the squeaky hinge on the barn door he'd been ignoring for months. Nathaniel followed him everywhere, handing him tools, asking questions, soaking up knowledge like dry earth drinking rain. That evening after dinner, after the children had gone to bed, Caleb and Clara sat by the fire. "I need to ask you something," Caleb said. "About your brother-in-law, this Eugene." Clara's face tightened. "What about him? How far will he go to get those children back?" She was quiet for a long moment. The fire cracked and popped. Outside wind whispered against the windows. "Eugene Mercer doesn't lose," she finally said. "Ever. He's spent his whole life making sure of that. When we were younger, Henry used to tell me stories how Eugene would cheat at games, then throw fits when anyone called him on it. How he once killed a neighbor's dog because it barked too loud. He's not right in the head, Caleb. Something's broken in there, and it's been broken since he was born. And he wants your children. He wants to own us, all of us. The children are just leverage." Her voice dropped. "He told me once after Henry died that he'd always wanted me, since the first time he saw me. Said Henry stole me from him, and now that Henry was gone, it was only right that I become his. Like I was property. Like I was something to be passed between brothers." Caleb felt a cold fury building in his chest. "He ever hurt you physically?" Clara was silent. "Clara." "Once." The word was barely audible. "When I refused his proposal, he grabbed me. Tried to—" She stopped, swallowed. "I hit him with a fireplace poker. Split his head open. That's when he decided to take the children. Said if I wanted to play rough, he'd show me what rough really meant. And the law did nothing. The law is whatever Eugene wants it to be. He owns the judge in our county, owns half the sheriff's deputies. I tried to fight it legal, tried to get a lawyer to help, but no one would take my case. Said it was too risky going against a man like Eugene." Caleb stood and walked to the window. The night outside was black, the snow reflecting moonlight in cold silver patterns. "He's coming," Caleb said quietly. "You know that, right? The storm bought you time, but it won't last. He'll send people, trackers, bounty hunters maybe. Men who don't care about right and wrong, just about getting paid. I know. And when they come, I'll run again. I'll take the children and— No." Clara looked up sharply. "What do you mean, no?" Caleb turned to face her. His expression was hard determined, the face of a man who'd made a decision and wouldn't be moved from it. "You're done running, Clara. You and those children. Running hasn't worked. It won't ever work. Men like Eugene don't stop. They keep coming until they get what they want, or until someone stops them. And you think you can stop him? I think I can sure as hell try." Clara rose from her chair. Her eyes were bright with something: anger, fear, hope, all tangled together. "You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what he's capable of." "I spent 10 years as a Texas Ranger, Clara. I've faced down Comancheros and outlaws and men who'd kill you for the boots on your feet. I know exactly what men like Eugene are capable of. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when you knocked on my door." He stepped closer to her. "When your children slept under my roof. When my daughter smiled for the first time in 2 years because your girls showed her it was okay to be happy again." Clara's breath caught. Tears she'd been fighting spilled down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for strangers?" Caleb reached out his rough hand, cupping her face, gently brushing the tears away with his thumb. "Because I was dead inside until you came. Because your boy hugged me today, and I felt something. Because your little girl called me nice, and my heart started beating again." His voice roughened. "Because maybe this is why I survived the fire. Maybe this is what I was supposed to do." Clara leaned into his hand just slightly, her eyes closing. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I. But we'll be scared together." They stood like that for a long moment, two people on the edge of something neither of them fully understood. Then Clara stepped back, wiping her eyes with her hands. "If we're doing this," she said, her voice steadying, "we do it right. No half measures. We need a plan." "Agreed. First thing tomorrow, you tell me everything about Wyoming territory and those custody laws you mentioned. I want to know every detail." "I'll tell you everything I know. And we need allies, people who'll stand with us when Eugene comes. There's a woman in town, Maggie O'Brien, runs the boarding house. She knows everyone, and she don't take kindly to men who hurt women and children." Clara nodded. "Then we start there." She moved toward the hallway, toward the room where Grace slept. At the doorway, she paused. "Caleb." "Yeah. Thank you for believing we're worth fighting for." "You are," he said simply. "Every single one of you." She disappeared into the darkness. Caleb stayed by the fire, staring into the flames, thinking about what he'd just committed to. A war against a powerful man. A fight that could cost him everything. But when he closed his eyes, he didn't see danger. He saw Lily's smile, heard Grace's laugh, felt Nathaniel's arms around his waist. He saw a family forming from broken pieces. And for the first time in 2 years, Caleb Morrison felt like he had something worth protecting again. Something worth living for. The fire burned low. The house settled into silence. Outside, the snow lay heavy and white, hiding the world beneath its cold embrace. But somewhere out there, men were coming. Men with guns and warrants and orders from a man who didn't accept the word no. The storm had passed. The real battle was just beginning. 3 days after the storm, the riders came. Caleb saw them first, a dark line against the white horizon moving slow and steady through the snow. 3 men on horseback picking their way along the road that led to his ranch. He set down the axe he'd been using to split firewood and watched them approach. His hand moved instinctively to his hip, to the Colt revolver he'd strapped on that morning. The same gun he'd carried for 10 years as a Texas Ranger. The same gun he'd hoped never to need again. "Clara." He didn't raise his voice, but she heard him from the porch where she'd been shaking out rugs. She looked up, saw the riders, went pale as new snow. "Get the children inside," Caleb said. "All of them. Keep them upstairs and keep them quiet." "Caleb." "Now, Clara." She moved without another word, her fear propelling her faster than any argument could. The porch door slammed. He heard her voice inside, calm but urgent, gathering the children like a hen, gathering chicks before a storm. The riders drew closer. Caleb could make them out now, 3 men, 2 in heavy coats and 1 in something finer. A badge glinted on one man's chest. Law. The other wore the hard look of someone paid to follow orders, no questions asked. And the third man. Caleb had never seen Eugene Mercer, but he knew him on sight. Soft hands. Expensive coat. A face that had never known real hardship, never worked a day in its life. He rode like a man who expected the world to bend around him, and the smile on his face as he approached the ranch was the smile of someone who'd already won. Caleb stepped forward to meet them, positioning himself between the riders and his house. "That's far enough," he called when they were 20 feet away. The man with the badge held up his hand, stopping the group. He was older, maybe 50, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. Not a cruel man, Caleb thought, just a tired one. "You Caleb Morrison?" the lawman asked. "I am. And you are?" "Sheriff Jack Holloway out of Timber Creek. This here's my deputy Sam Warren, and this gentleman," he gestured to the soft-handed man, "is Mr. Eugene Mercer, come all the way from Kansas." "Long way to travel in winter," Caleb said evenly. "Must be important business." Eugene Mercer nudged his horse forward, ignoring the sheriff's warning glance. His smile widened, showing too many teeth. "Mr. Morrison, I appreciate you providing shelter to my dear sister-in-law and her children during this dreadful storm. The whole family is grateful for your Christian charity." "That's so." "Indeed. But the storm has passed, and it's time for Elizabeth and the children to come home. Their family misses them terribly." Caleb didn't move. "Funny thing about that, Mr. Mercer. Mrs. Whitfield doesn't seem too eager to go back to Kansas, and her children seem downright scared at the idea." Eugene's smile flickered. Just for a moment, something cold and ugly passed behind his eyes. Then the mask was back. "I'm afraid my sister-in-law isn't well, Mr. Morrison. The death of my brother, her husband, affected her deeply. She's been saying all sorts of wild things, making accusations, behaving erratically. It's one of the reasons the court saw fit to place the children in my care." "The court?" "Yes, I have papers." Eugene reached into his coat and produced a folded document. "A custody order signed by Judge Harold Perkins of Douglas County, Kansas. Those children are my legal wards. Elizabeth had no right to take them." Sheriff Holloway cleared his throat. "Mr. Morrison, I've reviewed the documents. They appear to be in order. I've also got a warrant for Mrs. Whitfield's arrest on charges of kidnapping." Caleb felt the cold settle deeper in his bones. Not the cold of winter, the cold of a man facing impossible odds. "You come all this way to arrest a mother for protecting her children?" he asked quietly. "I come all this way to enforce the law," the sheriff said, "whatever my personal feelings might be." "And what are your personal feelings, Sheriff?" Holloway's jaw tightened. He glanced at Eugene, then back at Caleb. "That ain't relevant to the situation." "I think it is." "Mr. Morrison, I think a man who rides 3 days through snow to take children from their mother ought to at least be honest about whether he thinks it's right." Silence stretched between them. The horses' stamped breath steaming in the cold air. Eugene's smile had vanished entirely now. "This is ridiculous. Sheriff, do your job. Go in there and get my wards." "Mr. Mercer, I didn't pay you to stand around debating philosophy with some backwoods rancher. I paid you to bring those children home." Caleb's hand moved closer to his gun. "You paid him." The sheriff's face flushed. "Mr. Mercer provided funds for the expedition. It was a long journey, supplies were needed. So you're not here as the law, you're here as a hired man. Now see here, because if you're here as the law, you'd be interested to know that Mrs. Whitfield is currently employed on this ranch. Legal employment with a signed contract. That makes her a resident of Colorado Territory, which means any custody dispute goes through our courts, not Kansas courts." Eugene laughed. "That's absurd. A piece of paper doesn't change jurisdiction." "Actually, it does." Caleb reached into his own coat slowly, keeping his other hand visible, and pulled out the employment contract he and Clara had drafted. "Colorado Territory Revised Statutes of 1877. An individual who establishes legal employment and residency in the territory is subject to territorial law, not the law of their previous state of residence. You want those children, Mr. Mercer, you file in our courts." The sheriff took the document, read it over. His eyebrows rose. "This appears legitimate," he said slowly. "It is legitimate." That paper is 3 days old. Eugene's voice had risen to something close to a shout. She's been a resident of Kansas for 10 years. You can't just... I can. I did. Caleb met Eugene's eyes. And unless you've got a Colorado judge willing to sign off on your custody order, those children aren't going anywhere. Eugene's face had gone red. The mask was completely gone now, replaced by something twisted and ugly. This was the real Eugene Mercer, a man who couldn't stand being told no. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I am a councilman. I have connections in every territory from here to California. One word from me and your little ranch gets audited, investigated, shut down. One word and your reputation is destroyed. One word and what, Mr. Mercer? Caleb stepped forward. You'll hurt me. Kill me. I've had worse men than you try. They're all dead now. The deputy's hand moved toward his gun. Caleb's eyes flicked to him. Son, I'd think real careful about what you do next. I spent 10 years as a Texas Ranger. I've drawn on faster men than you and walked away clean. You sure you want to test me? The deputy's hand stopped. Sheriff Holloway held up both hands. Everyone calm down. Nobody's shooting anybody. He turned to Eugene. Mr. Mercer, the man has a point about the legal situation. I can't just ignore territorial law because it's inconvenient. You can and you will. No, sir, I can't. The sheriff's voice hardened. I agreed to help you find the woman and children. I agreed to serve the warrant if everything was in order. But it ain't in order, not anymore. You want to challenge this, you do it in court. Eugene's face twisted with fury. For a moment, Caleb thought the man might do something stupid, draw a weapon charge forward, something that would give Caleb an excuse to end this permanently. But Eugene Mercer hadn't survived this long by being stupid. He was cunning, patient, the kind of snake that waited in the grass until the perfect moment to strike. Fine. Eugene said, his voice suddenly calm. Too calm. We'll do this your way, Mr. Morrison. Courts, lawyers, all very civilized. He reined his horse around, then paused. But I want you to understand something. Those children are mine. That woman is mine. And I always get what's mine one way or another. This isn't over. It's just beginning. He rode off without waiting for a response. The deputy followed quickly, clearly relieved to be leaving. Sheriff Holloway lingered. He looked at Caleb with an expression that was hard to read. Respect maybe, or warning. You made a powerful enemy today, Mr. Morrison. I know. Eugene Mercer doesn't forgive, doesn't forget. He'll come at you sideways, ways you don't expect. I know that too. The sheriff nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I've heard things about Mercer. Things that don't sit well. I hope you know what you're doing taking on a man like that. I'm protecting a mother and her children. That's all I'm doing. That's not a small thing. No, sir, it's not. Holloway tipped his hat. Good luck to you, Mr. Morrison. I reckon you're going to need it. He rode off following the others. Caleb stood in the snow watching them go, his heart pounding with something that felt like equal parts fear and exhilaration. He'd won this round. But Eugene was right about one thing. This was just beginning. The door opened behind him. Clara stood on the porch, her face pale but determined. I heard everything, she said. From the window. Then you know. I know you just put yourself directly in his crosshairs. She came down the steps, her boots crunching in the snow. Caleb, you didn't have to do that. You could have stepped aside, let them take us, stayed out of it. No. He turned to face her. I couldn't. Why not? Because some things are worth fighting for. Because those children deserve better than being used as pawns by a man who wants to own them. Because... He stopped, swallowed. Because I haven't felt like myself in 2 years. And today, standing up to that man, I felt like I was alive again. Clara's eyes filled with tears. He'll come back. You know that. With lawyers, with more men, with whatever it takes. Then we'll be ready. How, how can we possibly be ready for someone like Eugene? Caleb took her hands in his. They were cold, trembling. We build allies. We gather evidence. We fight him in court and in public opinion. Men like Eugene Mercer survive because people are too scared to stand against them. But if enough people stand together, you really believe that? I have to. It's all we've got. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face against his chest. Caleb held her, felt her shaking, felt her strength and her fear and her desperate hope all tangled together. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for standing up for us." "Thank me when it's over," he said. "We've got a long fight ahead." That evening, after the children were fed and the chores were done, Caleb rode into town. Timber Creek wasn't much a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of other buildings clustered together like sheep in a storm. But it had one thing Caleb needed: Maggie O'Brien. The boarding house sat at the end of the street, a two-story building with a wraparound porch and a sign that read, "O'Brien's Rooms and Meals." Caleb tied his horse to the post and went inside. The common room was warm, lit by oil lamps and a fire in the stone hearth. A few travelers sat at tables eating dinner or playing cards. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the look of someone who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. "Caleb Morrison?" she said as he approached. "Been a while since you showed your face in town?" "Evening, Maggie." 2 years, if I recall. Not since you bought that ranch and locked yourself away from the world." She studied him with shrewd eyes. "Something's changed. You look almost alive." "I need your help." "Of course you do. Nobody comes to see old Maggie just for her charming personality." She gestured to a chair by the fire. "Sit. Talk. I'll get you some coffee." He sat. She brought coffee, strong hot, exactly what he needed. "I've got a situation," Caleb began. "A woman and 3 children showed up at my ranch during the storm. They're running from a man in Kansas, woman's brother-in-law. Name's Eugene Mercer." Maggie's eyes narrowed. "Mercer? I've heard that name." "He's a councilman. Banker. Got himself named legal guardian of her children after her husband died. He's been pursuing her. Pursuing. In ways that ain't appropriate. The woman hit him with a fireplace poker when he tried to force himself on her. That's when he decided to use the law to take her children." Maggie set down her coffee cup. Her face had gone hard. "I've known men like this, Mercer," she said quietly. "Men who use the law like a weapon, who think money and power give them the right to take whatever they want. I've helped women escape men like that before. That's why I'm here." "What do you need?" Caleb leaned forward. "I need allies, people who'll speak up for Clara when this goes to court. I need witnesses who can testify about the kind of man Eugene really is, and I need information, anything you might know or be able to find out about his past." Maggie was quiet for a moment, thinking. "There's a network," she finally said. "Women helping women. We don't advertise, don't make noise. But we've been moving people out of bad situations for years, getting them to safety, helping them start over." "Can you help Clara?" "I can do better than that." Maggie stood. "There's a woman in Denver, Rebecca Thornton. She worked in Mercer's household years ago when she was just 15. Something happened to her there. Something she's never talked about publicly. But I think if she knew she wasn't alone, if she knew other women were standing up, she might be willing to speak." "She might." Caleb felt hope stirring. "How do we reach her?" "I'll send word. Telegraph goes out in the morning." Maggie looked at him with new respect. "You're really going to do this? Take on a man like Mercer?" "I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. You could have turned that woman away, could have stayed out of it." "No, ma'am. I couldn't." Caleb met her eyes. "I buried my wife and son 2 years ago. Been dead inside ever since. That woman and her children, they woke something up in me. Something I thought was gone forever. I won't let a monster like Eugene Mercer destroy that." Maggie smiled a real smile, warm and approving. "Your wife was— Martha, wasn't she? I met her once at the church social before you moved out to the ranch. She was a good woman, kind, strong. She was. She would have wanted you to do this." The words hit Caleb like a benediction. His throat tightened. "I know," he managed. "That's partly why I am." He stayed another hour planning with Maggie, making lists of people who might help, strategies for the legal battle ahead. By the time he left, the moon was high and the streets were empty. He was halfway to his horse when a voice came from the shadows. "Mr. Morrison?" Caleb's hand dropped to his gun. A figure stepped out of the darkness between two buildings. Small, slender, wrapped in a coat too big for her frame. Rosie. "What in God's name?" Caleb strode toward her. "What are you doing here? How did you get here?" "I walked," Rosie said. Her chin was up defiant, but her eyes were afraid. "I followed you. I needed to talk to you alone." "Your mother must be worried sick." "I told Nate to cover for me. Please, Mr. Morrison, this is important." Caleb looked at the girl, 10 years old, standing in the freezing cold, determination written in every line of her small body. She'd walked 4 miles through snow to talk to him. "All right," he said slowly. "Talk." Rosie took a deep breath. "There are things about Uncle Eugene that Mama doesn't know. Things I never told her because I was scared. But if we're going to fight him, you need to know everything." "What kind of things?" "The night before we ran." Rosie's voice dropped. "Uncle Eugene came to our house. He and Mama were arguing downstairs. I was supposed to be asleep, but I snuck to the top of the stairs to listen." "What did you hear?" "Uncle Eugene said he was going to marry Mama, whether she wanted it or not. He said he'd take us away, Nate and Grace and me, and put us somewhere Mama would never find us. He said by the time he was done, the whole county would think Mama was crazy and nobody would believe a word she said." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Did your mother hear this?" "No, she was crying. He was standing over her real close and she couldn't get away. Then he—" Rosie swallowed. "He hit her. Hard. Across the face. She fell down and he just stood there, smiling." Cold fury bloomed in Caleb's chest. "Why didn't you tell your mother?" "Because I was scared, and because I didn't want her to know I'd seen. She tries so hard to protect us from the bad things. I didn't want to make it worse." "But you're telling me." "Because you stood up to him today. I saw it from the window." Rosie's eyes met his, fierce and determined. "Mama's been running for so long, running and hiding and being scared, but you didn't run. You didn't hide. You looked him right in the face and said no." She paused. "I want to do that too. I want to stop being scared and start fighting." Caleb knelt down so he was at her eye level. "What you just told me about what you saw, that's important. It could help us in court." "I know, that's why I'm telling you. Are you willing to say it in front of other people? A judge?" Rosie hesitated. For a moment she looked like what she was, a frightened child facing something too big for her. Then her jaw set. "Yes," she said. "If it helps keep my family safe, I'll say it to anyone." Caleb put his hand on her shoulder. "You're very brave, Rosie." "I'm scared." "Brave doesn't mean not scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway." Rosie almost smiled. "That's what Mama says." "Your Mama's a smart woman." He stood up and offered his hand. "Come on, I'll get you on my horse and take you home before your mother realizes you're gone. She's going to be mad." "Probably, but I reckon she'll be proud too once she hears what you did." They rode back to the ranch together, Rosie holding tight to Caleb's waist, the moon lighting their way. When they arrived, Clara was waiting on the porch, her face white with fear. "Rosie." She ran to meet them, pulling her daughter off the horse and into her arms. "Where were you? I've been worried sick." "Mama, I'm sorry I had to—" "You had to what?" Sneak out in the middle of the night. Walk alone in the dark. Do you have any idea what could have happened? She came to tell me something important, Caleb said quietly. Clara looked at him. What? Caleb glanced at Rosie. The girl nodded. You should hear it from her, he said. Inside by the fire. It changes things. They went inside. The other children were asleep, unaware of the drama that had unfolded. Clara made tea while Rosie talked, telling her mother everything she'd kept hidden. When she finished, Clara was crying. Baby, I'm so sorry. You should never have had to see that. To carry that alone. It's okay, Mama. No, it's not okay. None of this is okay. Clara pulled Rosie close, stroking her hair. But it will be. I promise you it will be. She looked at Caleb over her daughter's head. Her eyes were fierce, determined, all traces of fear burned away. We're going to destroy him, she said quietly. Whatever it takes. We're going to make sure he never hurts anyone again. Caleb nodded. That's the plan. Then let's make it happen. Later, after Rosie had been put to bed, Clara and Caleb sat alone in the kitchen. Maggie O'Brien is going to help us, Caleb said. She knows people. Women who've been hurt by men like Eugene. If we can get them to come forward, they will. Clara's voice was certain. Once they know they're not alone. Once they see other people standing up. That's what women like us need most, to know we're not crazy, not alone, not making it up. You're not any of those things. I know that now. She looked at him, her green eyes soft in the lamplight. Because of you. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, something warm and dangerous. Clara. I know. She held up her hand. It's too soon. We're in the middle of a fight. There's too much at stake. That's not what I was going to say. Then what? He reached across the table and took her hand. I was going to say that whatever happens next, whatever Eugene throws at us, I'm glad you knocked on my door. I'm glad I let you in. And I'm not going to let anyone take you away. Not him, not the law, not anyone. Clara's eyes glistened. That almost sounds like a promise. It is. She turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. Then I'm holding you to it, Caleb Morrison. I wouldn't have it any other way. The fire crackled. The wind whispered outside. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled at the moon. The battle was coming. They both knew it. Eugene Mercer would return with lawyers and warrants and whatever weapons money could buy. But tonight in this kitchen, two people who had been broken found strength in each other. And that Caleb knew was worth fighting for. Worth dying for, if it came to that. But he didn't intend to die. He intended to win. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of waiting, preparing, building their case piece by piece, while Eugene Mercer did the same. The telegram from Denver arrived on a Tuesday morning. Caleb was in the barn with Nathaniel when Clara came running, her skirts lifted above the snow, the paper clutched in her hand. She's coming, Clara said, breathless. Rebecca Thornton, she's coming to testify. Caleb set down the bridle he'd been mending. When? She'll arrive Thursday. The hearing is set for Friday. Clara's hands were shaking. This is really happening. It is. I'm scared, Caleb. He crossed to her, took her hands in his. I know. But we're ready. Are we? Eugene has lawyers from Kansas City. He has money. He has connections. What do we have? The truth, and people willing to speak it. Clara looked at him with eyes that held both fear and hope. Do you really believe that's enough? I have to. We all do. Thursday came with clear skies and bitter cold. Caleb drove the wagon into Timber Creek to meet the afternoon stage, leaving Clara at the ranch with the children. She'd wanted to come, but they'd agreed it was safer to keep her out of sight until the hearing. The stage was late. Caleb waited outside the depot, stamping his feet against the cold, watching the road. When the coach finally appeared, dust and snow swirling in its wake, he felt his heart rate quicken. 3 passengers stepped out. 2 men in traveling suits who hurried toward the hotel. And a woman. She was younger than Caleb had expected, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a simple knot and eyes that had seen too much. She carried a single carpet bag and moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to make herself small, invisible, unthreatening. "Miss Thornton." She looked up, flinched slightly at his size, his rough appearance. Then she straightened, lifted her chin. "Mr. Morrison." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't." Her voice was quiet but steady. "I've spent 10 years trying to forget what happened in that house. Trying to pretend it was a bad dream. Coming here means admitting it was real." "I understand." "Do you—" She met his eyes. "Do you understand what it means for a woman to stand up in public and say a powerful man hurt her? The looks she gets, the whispers. The people who call her a liar, a troublemaker, a woman of loose morals who brought it on herself." "No, ma'am, I don't. Not fully." Caleb spoke carefully. "But I know what courage looks like, and I know you've got it. Otherwise you wouldn't be here." Rebecca studied him for a long moment. Then something in her face softened. "Mrs. O'Brien said you were a good man, said you were protecting a woman and her children at great risk to yourself." "I'm doing what's right. Most men don't. Most men look the other way. Most men decide it's none of their business." "I'm not most men." Rebecca almost smiled. "No, I'm beginning to see that." She adjusted her grip on her carpet bag. "Shall we go? I've waited 10 years to speak the truth. I don't want to wait any longer." They drove to Maggie O'Brien's boarding house, where Rebecca would stay until the hearing. Maggie had gathered others, 2 more women, who had their own stories about Eugene Mercer, their own scars to show. Sarah Chen's cousin, who had worked as a maid in Eugene's household and barely escaped with her sanity. Patricia Whitmore's friend, whose daughter had been driven from town by Eugene's lies after she accused him of impropriety. 5 women in total, including Clara. 5 voices ready to speak against one powerful man. It should have felt like enough. It didn't. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, staring into the flames, running through every possible outcome of tomorrow's hearing. Clara found him there wrapped in a shawl, her feet bare on the cold floor. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you." She sat down beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. "I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong." "Don't." "I can't help it. Eugene is clever. He's had weeks to prepare. What if he's found a way to discredit the witnesses? What if the judge is one of his friends? What if—" "Clara." Caleb turned to face her. "Stop." "I'm trying." "Try harder." He took her hands. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. Win or lose. Do you understand? And if we lose, if they take my children, they won't. But if they do, they won't." His voice was fierce, certain. "I won't let them. I'll fight until my last breath before I let that man take those children." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why do you care so much about us?" "You know why." "Say it." Caleb looked at her. This woman who had stumbled into his life during a blizzard, who had thawed something inside him he thought was frozen forever, who had given him a reason to live again. "Because I love you," he said. "Because I love those children. Because you're my family now, whether there's been a ceremony or not. And a man protects his family." Clara made a small sound, half sob, half laugh, and pressed her forehead against his. "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't want to. Didn't think I could not after Henry. But you crept into my heart when I wasn't looking, and now I can't imagine my life without you in it." They sat like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Then Caleb pulled back slightly and looked into her eyes. "Tomorrow you need to speak. Not just the lawyers, not just the witnesses. You. The judge needs to hear from you directly who you are, what you've survived, why you ran. I don't know if I can. You can. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Clara Whitfield. You walked through a blizzard with 3 children to protect them. You can stand in a courtroom and speak the truth. Clara closed her eyes, drew a deep breath. All right, she said. I'll speak. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and bright. Caleb, dressed in his best clothes, the suit he'd worn to Martha's funeral, pressed and brushed, and still carrying the faint smell of cedar from the chest where it had lain for 2 years. Clara wore a dress borrowed from Maggie O'Brien, simple but dignified. Her hair was pinned up neatly, her face pale but composed. The children stayed at the ranch with one of Maggie's trusted friends. It was better that way. Whatever happened today, they didn't need to witness it. Except for Rosie. Rosie had insisted on coming, had said she would walk to town alone if they tried to leave her behind. Clara had relented, recognizing something in her daughter's eyes that couldn't be argued with. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread through Timber Creek about the hearing, about the Kansas councilman who had come to claim children that weren't his, about the woman who had run rather than submit to him. People had come to watch, to judge, to bear witness. Eugene Mercer sat at the front of the courtroom, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits. He was dressed immaculately, his face arranged in an expression of wounded dignity, the very picture of a respectable man wrongly accused. When Clara entered, his eyes found her immediately. He smiled, that cold, possessive smile that made her skin crawl. She looked away, found Caleb's hand, held on tight. All rise. The Honorable Judge William Blackwood presiding. The judge was older, perhaps 60, with a face like carved granite and eyes that missed nothing. He settled into his chair and surveyed the courtroom. This hearing concerns the custody of 3 minor children, Rosemary Nathaniel and Grace Whitfield, currently in the care of their mother, Elizabeth Clara Whitfield. Mr. Mercer, you have filed a petition claiming legal guardianship under Kansas law. Mrs. Whitfield, you contest this claim. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Clara's voice was steady, though Caleb could feel her trembling beside him. Mr. Mercer. Yes, Your Honor. And I have documents proving. You'll have your turn, Mr. Mercer. The judge's voice was sharp. I'll hear from Mrs. Whitfield first. Eugene's face tightened, but he nodded. The judge turned to Clara. Mrs. Whitfield, tell me in your own words why you fled Kansas with your children. Clara stood. Her knees felt weak, her mouth dry. She could feel every eye in the courtroom on her. She found Caleb's face in the crowd. He nodded slightly. She drew strength from that nod. Your Honor, my husband Henry died 10 months ago. We were married for 11 years. He was a good man, a hard worker, a loving father. When he died, I thought my world had ended. Her voice caught. She swallowed, continued. After the funeral, I discovered Henry had borrowed money from his brother Eugene to expand his blacksmith shop. Eugene came to collect. But he didn't want money. He wanted me. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Eugene's lawyers shifted in their seats. He proposed to me the day after we buried Henry. Said if I married him, he'd forgive the debt. When I refused, he became angry. He grabbed me, tried to force himself on me. I hit him with a fireplace poker and ran. That's a lie. Eugene was on his feet. She's lying. Mr. Mercer, sit down. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. You'll have your chance to speak. Eugene sat, but his face had gone red, the mask of civility beginning to crack. Clara continued. After that night, Eugene used his connections to destroy me. He found a judge who owed him favors, presented false evidence, had me declared an unfit mother. The court gave him guardianship of my children without even letting me speak in my own defense. I have the documents right here, Your Honor. One of Eugene's lawyers stood, papers in hand. Everything was done according to Kansas law. I'll examine the documents in due time. The judge waved him back. Mrs. Whitfield, please continue. I knew what would happen if Eugene got custody of my children. Clara's voice dropped. He's not interested in being their guardian. He's interested in controlling me. And my daughter Rosie. She paused, her jaw tightening. Eugene has looked at Rosie in ways that no man should look at a child, ways that make my blood run cold. Another murmur, louder this time. Several women in the gallery exchanged knowing glances. I ran because I had no other choice. I ran because the law had failed me and my children. I ran because I would rather die in a blizzard than see my daughter in that man's house. She sat down, her legs giving out beneath her. The judge was silent for a long moment, his face unreadable. Mr. Mercer, you may respond. Eugene stood. He had composed himself, arranged his face back into that mask of hurt dignity. Your Honor, I am devastated by these accusations. Simply devastated. My brother's widow has clearly been unhinged by grief. She's constructed a fantasy in which I am some kind of monster, when in truth I have only ever wanted to help her and care for my brother's children. He spread his hands, the picture of wounded innocence. I am a councilman, a businessman, a pillar of my community. I have letters of character from some of the most respected men in Kansas. The idea that I would behave improperly toward anyone, let alone a child, is absurd and offensive. Then you deny Mrs. Whitfield's allegations? Completely. They are the ravings of a disturbed woman who needs help, not indulgence. The judge turned to Clara's side of the courtroom. Do you have witnesses, Mrs. Whitfield? Caleb stood. We do, Your Honor. Several. Call them. The first witness was Rebecca Thornton. She walked to the front of the courtroom with her head held high, though Caleb could see her hands shaking. State your name and your connection to this matter. My name is Rebecca Thornton. 10 years ago, when I was 15 years old, I worked as a maid in Eugene Mercer's household. Eugene's face went pale. His lawyers began whispering urgently. What happened during your employment? Rebecca's voice trembled, but she didn't stop. Mr. Mercer came to my room one night. He said I was pretty, said he wanted to teach me things. When I tried to refuse, She stopped, swallowed. He forced himself on me. The courtroom erupted. People shouting, gasping, the judge banging his gavel for order. Lies. Eugene was on his feet again. This woman is a liar and a whore. Mr. Mercer, one more outburst and I will have you removed from this courtroom. The judge's voice was ice. Rebecca continued, her voice stronger now. I told his housekeeper what happened. She told me I must have misunderstood that Mr. Mercer was a good man, that I should forget it ever happened. When I tried to tell others, Mr. Mercer had me arrested for stealing silverware. My family had to leave town to escape the scandal. Do you have proof of these allegations? I have scars, Your Honor. Rebecca's chin lifted. Scars on my back where he beat me when I tried to fight him off. Scars I've carried for 10 years. Would you like to see them? The judge's face had hardened. That won't be necessary. He turned to Eugene. Mr. Mercer, do you have a response to this testimony? Eugene's lawyers were conferring frantically. Finally, one of them stood. Your Honor, this woman's testimony is irrelevant to the custody matter at hand. Whatever may or may not have happened 10 years ago has no bearing on Mr. Mercer's fitness as a guardian. I disagree. The judge's voice cut through the lawyer's words. It goes directly to character and credibility. 2 more witnesses followed. Sarah Chen's cousin, her voice barely above a whisper as she described similar incidents. Patricia Whitmore's friend, speaking for her daughter, who had been too frightened to come. Each story was different. Each story was the same. A pattern of predation, of using power to silence victims, of destroying anyone who dared to speak the truth. By the time the last witness finished, Eugene Mercer looked like a cornered animal. His mask had slipped completely, revealing something ugly and desperate underneath. Your Honor, this is a conspiracy. His voice was ragged. These women have been coached, paid, manipulated. By whom, Mr. Mercer? By him. Eugene pointed at Caleb. That man has been interfering since the beginning. He's hidden my brother's wife, turned my wards against me, orchestrated this entire spectacle. Mr. Morrison is not on trial here. He should be. He's harboring a fugitive. He's... Enough! The judge's voice was final. I've heard enough. He looked around the courtroom at the faces watching, waiting. I am not a Kansas judge, he said slowly. I cannot overturn a Kansas court order. That is beyond my jurisdiction. Clara's heart dropped. Eugene's face lit with triumph. However, the judge continued, I can and do find that Mrs. Whitfield has established legal residency in Colorado territory through documented employment and habitation. As such, any custody dispute must be adjudicated under our laws, not Kansas laws. Eugene's smile froze. Furthermore, based on the testimony presented today, I have grave concerns about Mr. Mercer's fitness as a guardian. Multiple credible witnesses have described a pattern of predatory behavior spanning at least 10 years. While these allegations have not been proven in criminal court, they are sufficient to deny Mr. Mercer's petition for custody transfer. You can't do this, Eugene sputtered. I have legal documents. Your documents are from Kansas. This is Colorado. The judge's voice was cold. The children will remain with their mother pending a full custody review by this court. Mr. Mercer, you are prohibited from contact with the children until that review is complete. This is outrageous. I'll appeal. I'll take this to the territorial governor. That is your right. But until such time as a higher court overturns my ruling, these children stay with their mother. The judge banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted in chaos. People rushing forward, voices raised in excitement and outrage. Clara stood frozen, unable to believe what she had just heard. We won, she whispered. Caleb grabbed her, pulled her into his arms. We won. Mama! Rosie pushed through the crowd and threw herself at Clara. Mama, we won. We get to stay. Clara held her daughter tight, tears streaming down her face. Yes, baby, we get to stay. Through the crowd, Clara saw Eugene Mercer. He was standing by the door, his lawyers trying to hustle him out, but his eyes were fixed on her. The look in those eyes made her blood run cold. This isn't over, that look said. I'll destroy you. I'll destroy everything you love. Then he was gone, pushed through the door by his handlers, disappearing into the winter morning. Caleb saw the exchange. His arm tightened around Clara. He won't give up, she said quietly. No. He won't. What do we do? Caleb looked at Rosie, still clinging to her mother, at the crowd of people who had stood up for them. We stay strong. We stay together. We watch our backs. He paused. And we keep building. Keep making allies. Keep showing the world who he really is. Clara nodded slowly. The fear was still there, but it was smaller now, manageable. They had won. Not completely. Not permanently, but they had won. And for today, that was enough. Outside the courtroom, Maggie O'Brien was waiting. Rebecca Thornton stood beside her, along with the other women who had testified. Well done, Maggie said, her eyes bright. All of you, well done. Rebecca came forward and took Clara's hands. You were so brave in there. I wish I had your strength. You testified. You stood up to him. That took more courage than I can imagine. I've been hiding for 10 years, Rebecca said. Hiding and being afraid. But today, watching your daughter, she shook her head. I don't want to hide anymore. I want to fight. Then stay, Clara said impulsively. Stay in Timber Creek. Help us. Rebecca hesitated. I don't have anywhere else to go. My family won't speak to me. I've been alone for so long. You're not alone anymore. Clara squeezed her hands. None of us are. Maggie stepped forward. There's room at my boarding house. Work too if you want it. The network always needs more hands. Rebecca looked at Caleb, at Clara, at the women who had stood with them. All right, she said finally. I'll stay. The group began to disperse, people heading back to their lives, their homes, their ordinary concerns. But Clara lingered, looking back at the courthouse. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked. "I'm thinking about what Eugene said in there, about destroying us." He was angry, cornered. He meant it. Clara turned to face Caleb. "He's going to come after us. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he will come." "I know." "And when he does," Caleb took her hand, "when he does, we'll be ready." They walked together toward the wagon, toward the ranch, toward their children, toward whatever future awaited them. The battle was won. But the war, Clara knew, was far from over. She looked at Caleb, at this man who had opened his door to strangers and found a family. At this man who had stood up to power and money and law because it was right. At this man she loved. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And together she was beginning to believe they could face anything. 6 months passed, like water through fingers, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but always moving toward something new. Spring came to Colorado territory with the gradual stubbornness of a mule being led uphill. Snow melted into mud, dried into earth. Earth burst forth with green shoots and wildflowers that painted the hills in colors Caleb had forgotten existed. The ranch transformed alongside the land. Fences mended barn-repainted fields prepared for planting. Work that had felt meaningless when Caleb did it alone now carried purpose because every improvement was for them. For the family that had grown around him like vines around a fence post. Nathaniel had become his shadow, appearing at his elbow every morning before dawn, ready to work. The boy had shot up 2 inches since winter, filling out with muscle from honest labor, losing that hollow, haunted look he'd worn when he first arrived. "Caleb," Nathaniel's voice came from the barn doorway. "You got a minute?" "Always." Caleb set down the harness he'd been mending. "What's on your mind?" The boy shuffled his feet, suddenly awkward. At 8 years old now, his birthday had passed in April, celebrated with Clara's apple cake and Lily's off-key singing. He was caught between childhood and something older. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel said slowly, "about my pa." Caleb waited. "I don't remember him real good anymore. His face gets fuzzy when I try to picture it. Sometimes I can't remember his voice at all." The boy's jaw tightened. "Is that bad? Does it mean I didn't love him enough?" Caleb felt his chest constrict. He thought of Martha, of Daniel, of how their faces had begun to blur at the edges, how he sometimes had to look at the photograph on the mantel to remember exactly how Martha's smile curved. "Come here, son." Nathaniel came. Caleb put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Memory's a strange thing. It holds on to what it needs and lets go of what it doesn't. Your pa's face might get fuzzy, but I'd bet anything you remember how he made you feel. Safe, loved, like you mattered." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, I remember that. That's what counts. That's what stays." Caleb squeezed his shoulder. "And missing someone, forgetting little pieces of them, that don't mean you didn't love them. It just means you're still alive, still growing. Your pa would want that." "You think so?" "I know so, because that's what I want for my boy Daniel. Wherever he is, I want him to know that I'm still living, still loving, still being the best man I can be." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. Then he looked up at Caleb with those 2 old eyes. "Is it okay if I think of you like a pa? Not to replace my real pa, but just, in addition, like having 2. The words hit Caleb like a fist to the heart. He had to clear his throat twice before he could speak. "I'd be honored, son. More than honored." Nathaniel grinned, a real boyish grin that made him look his age for once. Then he threw his arms around Caleb's waist, the same way he had that first morning in the barn, and held on tight. Caleb held him back. The permanent custody hearing took place on a warm day in May. The same courthouse, the same judge. But this time there was no fear in the air, no desperate uncertainty. Eugene Mercer wasn't there. He'd returned to Kansas after the initial hearing, his appeals denied, his reputation in tatters. Word had spread about the testimony against him. More women had come forward. His position on the council had become untenable. Caleb heard later that Eugene had resigned his seat and retreated to a small property in Missouri, far from anyone who knew what he'd done. It wasn't justice, not really, not completely, but it was something. The children would never have to fear him again. Judge Blackwood reviewed the documents, asked his questions, heard Clara's testimony about the past 6 months, how the children were thriving, how they'd enrolled in the local school, how Nathaniel had learned to read better, and Rosie had made friends, and little Grace had finally stopped having nightmares about being hungry. "Mrs. Whitfield," the judge said finally, "this court is satisfied that you have established permanent residency in Colorado Territory, and that you have provided a stable, loving home for your children. Full custody is hereby granted." Clara's hand found Caleb's under the table. She squeezed so hard his knuckles cracked. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "all outstanding warrants from Kansas are hereby dismissed as lacking jurisdiction in this territory. You are free, Mrs. Whitfield, completely and legally free." Clara broke down. Right there in the courtroom in front of God and everyone, she put her face in her hands and sobbed. Caleb wrapped his arm around her, pulled her close, let her tears soak into his shirt. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "It's really over." "I can't believe it." Her voice was muffled. "After everything, after all this time." "Believe it. You're free. The children are yours. No one can take them away." She looked up at him, her face wet, her eyes bright. "Ours," she said quietly. "The children are ours." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Caleb smiled. "Yes, ma'am. Ours." The proposal came on a Sunday evening in June. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The children were inside, their voices carrying through the open windows, Rosie helping Grace with her letters, Nathaniel telling Lily some tall tale that made her laugh. "Clara." She turned to look at him, her face soft in the fading light. "I've been thinking," Caleb said slowly. He was not a man comfortable with words, never had been. But these words mattered too much to leave unsaid. "About us, about what comes next." "And what have you concluded?" "That I don't want to live another day without you being my wife." Clara's breath caught. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, simple gold band with a tiny diamond, not much to look at, but it had taken him 3 trips to town to find one that felt right. "This ain't fancy," he said. "I ain't fancy. I'm just a rancher with too many scars and not enough smooth words. But I love you, Clara. I love your children like they're my own. And I want to spend whatever years I've got left making you happy." He opened the box, held it out to her. "Will you marry me?" Clara stared at the ring again. Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling that radiant smile that lit up her whole face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. Yes, you stubborn, wonderful, impossible man. Yes, I'll marry you." She launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking them both off the porch bench. Caleb caught her, held her, felt her laughter vibrating against his chest. "Mama!" They turned. 4 children stood in the doorway, eyes wide. Rosie's face split into a grin. Nathaniel pumped his fist. Grace clapped her hands without quite knowing why. And Lily was crying and smiling at the same time. "Are you getting married?" Rosie asked. "Really, truly." "Really, truly," Clara said. The children rushed forward, surrounding them, everyone talking at once. Questions about dresses and parties and whether they could throw flowers, and what should they call Caleb now. In the chaos, Lily tugged on Caleb's sleeve. "Papa," she said. His heart stopped. It was the first time she'd called him that since the fire. The first time she'd claimed him as her own again. "Yes, little bird. I'm glad." Her voice was small but steady. "Mama would be glad too. And Daniel. They'd want us to be happy." Caleb knelt down and gathered his daughter into his arms. "I think you're right. he said, his voice rough. "I think they'd want exactly that." The wedding was held in August when the wildflowers were at their peak and the days were long and golden. Pastor Williams from Timber Creek performed the ceremony. Maggie O'Brien helped Clara with her dress, a simple white gown that she'd sewn herself with lace at the collar that Rebecca Thornton had tatted by hand. The guests filled the yard of the Morrison Ranch. Neighbors who had become friends. Women from Maggie's network who had heard the story and wanted to witness the happy ending. Sheriff Holloway, who had apologized privately to Clara for his part in Eugene's first visit and sworn to protect her family from then on. Caleb waited at the front, uncomfortable in his suit, tugging at his collar. "Stop fidgeting," Nathaniel whispered from beside him. The boy was serving as best man, his hair slicked down and his face scrubbed pink. "You look fine." "I look like a stuffed goose." "You look like a man about to marry the best woman in Colorado." Caleb couldn't argue with that. Then the music started, just a fiddle and a guitar played by two ranch hands from the Henderson place, and Clara appeared at the end of the makeshift aisle. She was beautiful, more beautiful than Caleb had ever seen her. The white dress caught the sunlight, and her hair was loose around her shoulders, threaded with wildflowers that Grace had picked that morning. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Her eyes, bright with joy, fixed on his face like he was the only person in the world. She walked toward him, with Rosie on one side and Grace on the other, each girl holding one of her hands. Behind them came Lily, scattering flower petals with serious concentration, determined to do her job perfectly. When Clara reached him, she handed the girls off to Maggie and took Caleb's hands in hers. "You clean up pretty good, Mr. Morrison." "You're one to talk, Mrs. Soon-to-be Morrison." Pastor Williams cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The vows were simple, the kind of vows that didn't need fancy words because the meaning behind them was so clear. "I promise to love you," Caleb said, his voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to choke him. "To protect you and your children. To stand beside you in hard times, and celebrate with you in good times. To be your partner in all things from this day forward." "I promise to love you," Clara echoed. "To support you, to challenge you, to hold you accountable and hold you close. To build a life with you that honors the ones we've lost while embracing the future we've found together." The rings were exchanged. Caleb's ring, a match to Clara's simple gold, that would wear well through years of ranch work and family life. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado," Pastor Williams said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Caleb cupped Clara's face in his hands, looked into her eyes for one long moment, then kissed her. The crowd erupted in cheers. The children rushed forward surrounding them, everyone crying and laughing at once. When Caleb finally pulled back from the kiss, Clara was smiling so wide it looked like her face might split. "Hello, husband," she said. "Hello, wife. Now what?" Caleb looked at the children, his children now in every way that mattered. At Nathaniel beaming with pride. At Rosie trying to look dignified but failing. At Grace bouncing on her toes with excitement. At Lily holding Grace's hand more alive than she'd been in 2 years. "Now," he said, "we live." The reception lasted until the stars came out. Food and dancing and stories told around a bonfire in the yard. Children chasing each other through the darkness, their laughter echoing across the hills. Neighbors making toasts, raising glasses, celebrating not just a wedding, but a victory. A family forged from loss and fear and the stubborn refusal to give up. Later, after the guests had gone home and the children had been tucked into bed, Caleb and Clara stood together on the porch. The night was warm, the sky thick with stars, the air sweet with the smell of grass and flowers. "It doesn't feel real," Clara said softly. 6 months ago, I was running for my life, terrified, certain that Eugene would catch us, that my children would be taken. And now you're standing on your own porch, legally free with a husband who will fight the whole world to keep you safe." When you put it that way, it sounds like something out of a storybook. Maybe it is. Caleb wrapped his arm around her, pulled her close. Maybe that's what happens when good people refuse to give up. They get their storybook ending. Clara leaned into him. You saved us, Caleb. That night in the storm when you opened your door, you saved our lives. No. He turned her to face him, looked into her eyes. You saved mine. I was dead inside, Clara. Going through the motions, keeping Lily alive out of obligation instead of love. Then you knocked on my door and you brought something back to life in me that I thought was gone forever. What was that? Hope. Clara's eyes glistened. Who saved who then? Reckon we saved each other. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the lines that hard years had carved into his skin. I love you, Caleb Morrison. I love you too, Clara Morrison. The name sounded right on his tongue. Perfect. They stood there for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead, breathing the cool night air, simply being together. The past was behind them. Martha and Henry Daniel and the lost baby Rose, all the grief and pain and loneliness, it hadn't disappeared, would never completely disappear, but it had been transformed, woven into something new, a foundation on which to build rather than a weight dragging them down. And the future stretched out before them, full of possibility. 3 months after the wedding, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Caleb on a crisp autumn evening when the leaves had turned gold and red, and the air had that sharp bite that promised winter was coming. He was sitting at the kitchen table going over accounts when she set a cup of coffee in front of him and sat down across from him. We need to talk. The words sent a spike of fear through him. In his experience, conversations that started with, "We need to talk," never ended well. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. Something's right. Something's very, very right. He stared at her, not understanding. Caleb, I'm going to have a baby. The world stopped. A baby? Yes. Dr. Reed confirmed it this morning. I'm about 2 months along. The baby should come in late spring. A baby. His baby. Their baby. Caleb's mind raced through 1,000 thoughts at once. Joy and terror tangled together, memories of loss and hope for the future colliding in his chest. Caleb, say something. He looked at Clara, his wife, the mother of his children, the woman who had brought him back to life, and felt tears he hadn't known were coming spill down his cheeks. I'm going to be a father again. Yes. We're going to have a baby. Yes. He was around the table before he knew he'd moved, pulling her up out of her chair, wrapping his arms around her, holding her so tight, he worried he might hurt her. I love you, he said against her hair. I love you so much. Is that a happy cry or a scared cry? Clara asked, her voice muffled against his chest. Both. Definitely both. She laughed that beautiful laugh that had healed something broken inside him. Me too. They told the children that night at dinner. The reaction was chaos, joyful, wonderful chaos. Nathaniel whooped so loud the dishes rattled. Rosie burst into happy tears. Grace asked if the baby could be a puppy instead. And Lily sat very still, her eyes wide. Lily! Caleb reached for his daughter's hand. Are you all right? I'm going to be a big sister, Lily said slowly. A real big sister. Yes, you are. Like Rosie is to Grace and Nate. Exactly like that. Lily's face transformed into the biggest smile Caleb had ever seen from her. I'm going to be the best big sister in the whole world. I'm going to teach the baby everything. How to ride horses, how to read, how to make flower crowns, everything. Clara wiped her eyes. I'm sure you will, sweetheart. The table erupted into planning and speculation. Would it be a boy or a girl? What should they name it? Would the baby sleep in Grace's room or get its own room? Could Nathaniel teach it to fish? Caleb sat back and watched his family. This impossible, beautiful family that had been forged from two broken pieces into something whole and felt a peace he hadn't known since before the fire. This was what he'd been missing. This was what he'd been dying without. Not just love, but connection, purpose. People who needed him and whom he needed in return. He caught Clara's eye across the table. She smiled at him, that soft, knowing smile that said she understood everything he was feeling without a word being spoken. He smiled back. Winter came gently that year, as if the land itself understood that this family had weathered enough storms. The Morrison Ranch settled into its rhythms. Morning chores, school for the children, dinner around a table that now seated 7 and would soon seat 8. Evenings by the fire with Caleb reading aloud, while Clara sewed baby clothes and the children did their homework or played quiet games. On Christmas Eve, 1 year to the day since Clara had knocked on Caleb's door, the whole family gathered for dinner. Maggie O'Brien came and Rebecca Thornton and a few neighbors who had become dear friends. Before they ate, Caleb stood at the head of the table and raised his glass. 1 year ago tonight, a woman and 3 children knocked on my door in the middle of a blizzard. I almost didn't open it. I almost let them freeze because I was too scared to let anyone into my life again. He looked around the table at the faces watching him. But I opened that door, and everything changed. His eyes found Clara's. She was crying already, one hand pressed to her swelling belly. I want to thank you, he said, his voice rough. All of you, for giving me a reason to live again, for showing me that love doesn't run out, that the more you give, the more you have. For teaching me that family isn't just blood, it's choice. It's showing up every day and choosing each other. He raised his glass higher. To family, the one we were born with and the one we build, the one we lost and the one we found. May we never take it for granted. To family, everyone echoed. They ate and laughed and told stories late into the night. The children eventually fell asleep in piles tangled together like puppies, and the adults carried them to bed one by one. When the house was finally quiet, Caleb and Clara stood together at the window, watching the snow fall softly outside. 1 year, Clara said. It feels like a lifetime. Best year of my life. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Even with all the fear, all the uncertainty. Because of it, the hard things make the good things sweeter. Clara turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that held everything love and gratitude and hope, and the fierce determination that had carried her through blizzards and courtrooms and all the battles in between. Thank you for opening your door, she said. Caleb thought of the man he'd been that night. Broken. Frozen. Dying inside while his body kept going through the motions. He thought of the man he was now. Husband, father, protector. Alive in a way he'd forgotten was possible. Thank you for knocking, he said. He kissed her softly, gently, the kiss of a man who had all the time in the world. And outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white, burying the old year and all its pain beneath a blanket of peace. Spring came with wildflowers and warm winds and the cries of a newborn baby. They named her Hope. She had Caleb's dark hair and Clara's green eyes and a cry loud enough to wake the whole house. She was perfect. Caleb held his daughter for the first time in the golden light of a May morning. Looking down at her tiny face, feeling her small hand wrap around his finger. Hello, little one, he whispered. Welcome to the family. The other children crowded around all of them, wanting to see, to touch, to welcome their new sister. She's so small, Nathaniel said, awed. She'll grow, Caleb assured him. Can I hold her? Lily asked. Caleb settled Hope carefully into Lily's arms, showing her how to support the baby's head. Lily held her with the tenderness of someone who understood how precious new life was. Hi, Hope, Lily said softly. I'm your big sister. I'm going to take care of you forever and ever. Hope blinked up at her with unfocused newborn eyes, and Lily smiled that radiant smile that Caleb had thought was lost forever until Clara knocked on his door. He looked around the room at his family, Clara exhausted but glowing, watching their children with love written across every feature. Nathaniel already declaring he would teach the baby to ride before she could walk. Rosie practical as always, making lists of everything the baby would need. Grace fascinated by Hope's tiny fingers. And Lily holding her baby sister like she was the most precious thing in the world. This was what he'd built. What they'd built together. From broken pieces and desperate circumstances, from grief and fear and the stubborn refusal to give up. A family. A home. A life worth living. Caleb Morrison had spent 2 years dying. Then 3 desperate knocks had changed everything. He'd opened his door to strangers in a storm, and found something he thought he'd lost forever. Not just love, not just purpose, something more fundamental than either. Hope. The same hope he now held in his daughter's name. The same hope that had carried them through courtrooms and blizzards and all the dark nights in between. The same hope that would carry them forward into whatever future waited. Because that was what family did. They held on to each other. They fought for each other. They chose each other again and again every single day. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the storms they'd weathered. Not the battles they'd won. Just this, a room full of people who loved each other, a baby named Hope, and a man who had finally learned that the courage to open your door could change everything. Caleb Morrison held his daughter close, surrounded by his family, and smiled. He was home.